The idea I pitched was, how about if we get seniors to tell their stories and let the public know about their stories, and stories that you never heard of before. And I say that would be easy because it's their family story, and they'll be much more comfortable telling it because it's about themselves and their family.
I grew up in families where family was important, and knowing who your family is a really major part of who we are.
This is the only way that we can legitimately hear people's voices about the pioneers of this area. If we do not speak about these periods, they will be lost forever. In that way, the respect for the land, the respect for the people who came before, the respect for the neighbors, the people who helped them. Those stories are not lost, even though generations of those families may be gone.
I enjoy talking to the people. I've been teacher for whole of my life, so talking to students or talking to people is my habit. Sometimes my wife says, "Slow down, you're not teaching anymore." So, on the whole, it was a very good experience.
It shines a light on where people came from, what their culture is, what the thinking was as they were growing up. And the grandchildren are especially interested in that, especially when we came from a different country. It's a forming of a person's psyche and personality.
It's been said that no one can tell your story. I mean, there's a narrative where, other people will summarize the history, etc. But I have found through writing our family story and the history of the Chinese coming to Canada that we have our own perspective.
It helps people really find their sense of belonging, because oftentimes people's stories are not shared, and people say, well, my story doesn't matter. So, everybody has a story, the good, the bad, the ugly. People want to hear our stories.
Well, I think most younger people want to know what the world was like before it was like it is now. It's sort of, if you don't know where you've been, how can you tell where you are?
I was kind of pitching my idea, what I want to do. And somehow Lynn and I got onto a topic about something that would reflect multiculturalism. And so we hit on the idea of Dominion Day. And Lynn, being the high school teacher, she said, well, the concept behind Dominion Day is really about welcoming newcomers, new immigrants to Canada. It's about multiculturalism. And so we say, yeah, that may be a great idea. And it will allow us to do what we want to do, focus on seniors, focus on multiculturalism, focus on storytelling as education.
Collecting my story has been a wonderful experience for my family because they never hear me talk about the people that I remember from my childhood. They're always interested in more recent things. But the people I'm going to talk about date back to the 1800s, and that's a very special thing now.
Actually, it has kind of solidified what my story was, because I had to do some preparation for it. And the interesting thing was that I found a lot of evidence to what I thought were just memories, because I was very young when the story started. And since then, I have written somewhat of a book to give to my grandchildren.
Well, growing up, I didn't know too much about my family's history or how my parents came to Canada. And basically after they passed, 1988 for my father, 1990 for my mother, got a little bit more interested in how they landed in Canada. And since then, I've researched, their past from wherever I could. So I started looking into, documents at home, and then other documents that I could find, from various sources like Library and Archives Canada. So I've been talking about the immigration of the Chinese to Canada and how it intertwines with our family story.
Well, it's been very heartwarming when we tell people, the story of our grandmother, Mary Burley, John Burley, and their journey. We always ask, what's your family story? And that really resonates with people, and people take that as, wow, people that there's a sense of caring. We're having real conversations, like not just telling our story, but also wanting to hear how other people's stories, their triumphs, their fails, what their family went through, and how they came to be who they are today. So it's very impactful.
They were curious to know the way I lived and the way I'm living. So that made quite a bit of difference. Yeah, so there were a few people who were very interested to know my part of life before I moved to Canada.
I'm hearing so much about the younger generation always want to know where they come from, who we are, who I am, what's my family story. Right? And then they always regret it because how come when they're here, I never ask them those questions. They're wanting to reach out for that, but it's too late. And so I'm hoping this will encourage more people to look at capturing those stories or be curious and ask the question, tell me a story about our family.
I think it's been an excellent project, and actually the longer that it goes on, the more I think it's an important project. I'm the oldest of 35 grandchildren on one side of the family, my mother's side, and I came across a photograph the other day, and I know all these people, but I don't remember everyone's name. And then I thought, well, I'll just ask somebody. There is nobody to ask. I'm the oldest one, and it makes me realize I've got a job to do.
Funny thing is, the Chinese history in Canada, when I went to school, there's really nothing in the curriculum. When my kids went to school, very little in the curriculum, and even now, still not extensive. And, with all the older folks gone, we don't have their narrative. We just have, what we can garner from historical accounts. And most of those are from the colonial aspect, and not from the Chinese aspects.
There aren't many people who have shared the stories that my father had, for example, coming out to Alberta in 1906 and living in a granary on a farm. He used to talk about the ice growing overnight on the inside walls. History books tended to concentrate on kings and leaders. Like, we don't know what kinds of sounds that peasants heard in their houses at night.
Telling ordinary stories about ordinary lives. Sometimes you find very interesting stories connected to the overall history of Edmonton that you don't know of. One of the storytellers was telling about the fur trade. One of their relatives had their own fur store, so that was very interesting. The other one who escaped from Poland and came to Edmonton as a child, and the harrowing experience of trying to escape during World War II under German occupation. So those are the kind of things that I would say they link to the bigger story.
Personally, I just feel, and I like this information because it helps me to know where my ancestors came from, what they did, where they lived, and what their interests were, their values were, and what it was like living at the times that they did. I'm sure that has an influence on who we are.
When I interview some of the Chinese seniors, what I get is they no longer can remember, or they're vague about details now. We want to document their stories, capture their stories, so that they don't get lost, and it will be an addition to the collection in the city archives. I'm hoping that for the people involved in the project, that they're more willing to do more of it, even on their own. And I heard one or two of them telling me that, yeah, because of this, they're now telling others about their own story instead of keeping it to themselves.
My story is only one of many, many, and their stories are so important that we get those stories down and we have them somewhere.
My grandmother was a person that would connect people. And so this experience has helped us connect with people and share our stories, and also find common, similarities. Speaking with the Chinese Canadian people who went through the same type of trial and tribulations, and they were also around in this neighborhood the same time Mary Burley was living and working in this neighborhood. And some of them knew her, they worked alongside her, and they remember her. And I think that common human shared history is that we all have had to overcome something.
They say that you can't make the mistakes of everyone that's come before you. If we do, we're repeating history. If we don't know about, those things that were undesirable, they could happen again. And I think we see this around the world already.
I guess one of my mainstays is that in order to grow personally, you have to experience some conflict and some challenges. And I think by sharing our challenges, people realize that that's just another phase of maturity. That's my philosophy at this point, is that it makes you stronger.
We could either, stay closed off or come together to make a difference. And I think coming together with our stories, with our hopes, our dreams, our aspirations is very important in creating the community that we want today, a community of unity, respect, and care. And that's what my grandmother did, and she would want us to continue to do.